Is America still a feasible market for board game designers in 2025? I'm Adam Porter. I'm a board game designer from Wales, and in this video, like in many of my previous videos, I'm going to go through comments that people have left on my YouTube videos and just discuss them really freely to try and give answers that are maybe a little longer than I'm able to type. You'll have seen other videos I've made in this series before. So the first question, it doesn't specifically relate to 2025. Maybe I'm going to elaborate a little bit on that because of what's going on in America right now with the tariffs and so on. But the question was relating to a video I made some time ago called What's Changed in Board Game Design? We'll have a quick look at the video and then we'll come back and I'll answer the question. So getting straight into it, the first thing that I would mention is there's more games around, far more games, and there were a lot back in 2014, don't get me wrong. 2024, there are thousands and thousands of games coming out, more than 1,000 every year. I would estimate on the basis of what comes out at Essen Spiel and Gen Con, and of course that's without looking at those big Asian markets, the Tokyo Game Fair and so on. So the question was, do you think the market is different across the pond? What do you see about your sales and numbers of interactions between the North American and European continents? I would imagine the US market is much tougher to get into. What do you think? I must admit, most of my interactions have been in the European market. In fact, I've never pitched in America. I've never gone to America to game conventions or anything like that. I have had a game released with an American publisher, WizKids, and that was my game Throne. And I've certainly had my other games have been released in America, as well as, you know, around the world, even though they are with usually European publishers. American publishers do come over to Europe, so I do get the opportunity to meet with those companies from time to time. I don't perceive, from what I've seen and the designers that I've spoken to, that it's more difficult to get games published in America if you're trying to get them licensed by publishers. I think exactly the same processes apply. There might be a difference in terms of the sort of games that they're interested in. In fact, I'm quite sure that that is probably the case. Although it's hard to pinpoint exactly what those differences are, because we've seen a sort of real merging of that European style and that American thematic style to the point where those old labels Eurogame and Ameritrash have kind of started to seem a little bit meaningless and unnecessary when everything seems to be a hybrid of the two these days. So I think the processes that I've talked about on this channel apply really wherever you are. That said, there are significant changes going on right now, and I'm no expert on tariffs and I've no idea what's going to go on over the next few months or years. In fact, nobody does really, frankly, do they? I mean, it's fascinating listening to people, the publishers who are affected by this and what they're doing about it right now. Listening to Jamie Stegmaier talking at length from Stonemaier Games about, you know, yesterday I was hearing he's launching a lawsuit along with a bunch of other companies against the President of the United States, saying that the tariffs are unlawful and it's not within the remit of the President to launch these tariffs. That it has to come from Congress and the President can only do it in an emergency situation. I doubt very much that this lawsuit is going to be successful, but it's fascinating to see the publishers, you know, really pushing back against what's going on. I should clarify where we're at here. The tariffs are currently, I believe, around 145% tariffs on anything manufactured in China, aside from certain items like smartphones and certain other digital items. But board games, certainly, coming out of China into the US, they're going to get 145% tax put on that when they come through. And it's the publisher that's paying that, right? It's not China that's paying that, it's the American publisher that's paying it. And they're paying it on stuff that's already on the boat, right? Stuff that's already been produced. They've already made the deal, they've ordered it, it's on its way. And now they're going to have to pay this tax that was unexpected. Now, they may have anticipated they might have had to pay 20 or 30% if Trump got into power, but it was never really talked about that it would be 145%. And that is crippling, and we're starting to see, very sadly, publishers going under and games that were in production not being made. Will they ever be made? I don't know. I guess there's a chance that they come back, but it's devastating to see the people losing income and trying to imagine what's going to happen in the market from here on. What does that mean for us designers? What do we do? Like, how do we pivot in this market? Do we continue just doing everything that we did before? I can't believe that things aren't going to change, right? In terms of the sort of games that are produced, the amount of games that are produced. I can't tell you the right answers about that, but my own personal feeling is pull back on the big stuff, right? The stuff where there's loads of components, that feels like it's going to be the difficult stuff. For somebody like Stonemaier, they say that 65% of their business is in America, and I'm sure that's true of many, many publishers. Maybe some of the European publishers, slightly less so, but it's still going to be a significant portion of their market in America. So they're going to want to pull back on the really expensive stuff, or try and manufacture some stuff outside of the US, which is really difficult because manufacture some stuff outside of China, which is really difficult because it's only really China who has the technology and the expertise to do it at the levels, the scale and the price that we're used to, just because they've been doing it for decades, leading the way for decades. So what can be manufactured outside of China is going to be simple stuff, isn't it? It's going to be card games, little games, and publishers are not going to want to take risks on hugely innovative products. They're going to fall back on tried and tested formulas, themes and worlds of games, their existing licenses, because they know those things will sell, and hopefully they can maintain enough of a profit margin to stay afloat. I know a lot of them are hoping that these tariffs won't last for long, and if they can just store their games in these Chinese warehouses and delay bringing them across, maybe they get away without having to pay that tax. It means American gamers are going to miss out on some releases that will be released elsewhere in the world, or they're going to pay a lot more for those games. As a designer, I think I'm going to hold back on some of my bigger products. I'm never in a rush, right? This isn't my full-time career. I think I'm going to hold back some of the bigger stuff and think about maybe I pitch that in 2026 if things are looking a little bit different, or 2027. I've got time. In the meantime, I can focus on the small stuff that maybe has a better chance of getting made in this current climate. So that's where I perceive the difference between Europe and America right now. But as I say, I'm no expert. I'm just somebody who watches podcasts, listens to podcasts, watches videos just like you guys, reads a lot of stuff online, and tries to keep up with what's going on. But I'm so sorry for the people who are affected by this, the designers that have missed out on games that were due to be published, the awful things that are happening to publishers right now. A good friend of mine, Matt Dunstan, his game was caught up in that Final Frontiers situation where that Final Frontier games closed down, and the Sixth Realm is no longer going to, presumably be published unless somebody else reaches out and saves it. But what an awful situation to be caught up in as a designer or as a publisher, particularly if your livelihood depends upon this stuff. Right, let's get away from hopefully some of that heavy stuff. The next question came from my video, The Board Game Industry Start Here. Let's have a quick look at that video. Well, if we use the universal board game currency of wheat, then we can imagine that a hypothetical board game costs 5 wheat to manufacture. But the manufacturer needs to make a profit, so they sell the final version to the publisher for 10 wheat per unit. Now the publisher wants to take their cut, so they sell the game to a distributor at the cost of 20 wheat per unit. The distributor takes their cut and sells the games to retail stores at a cost of 30 wheat per unit. The retail store has huge overheads to pay to keep their store afloat, so they sell at the recommended retail price of 60 wheat, and the chain is complete. Aha, but what about the inventor, the person without whom none of this would have been possible? Well, they're paid by the publisher, usually by way of royalties for each copy sold. So a typical deal might be 5% of the wholesale cost, by which I mean the inventor receives 5% of the wheat paid to the publisher by the distributor. In our hypothetical example, that means for a game costing 60 wheat, the inventor will receive 1 wheat, or thereabouts. And the question is it feasible to earn a full-time salary in the industry rather than freelancing? I'm curious if there's a stable way to earn an income in toys and games other than by founding and running your own publishing company. I hope to live in a world where board game artisans, encompassing all the creative work, is properly compensated. I think it is possible, right? There's nothing stopping artisans, there's nothing stopping creative people making a living and being properly compensated. I feel quite well compensated for my work, right? I don't get a lot of money from it, but then my games are not massive hits. They sell a few thousand copies. Some of them have sold tens of thousands of copies, and I get a small proportion of that, but they're not, you know, Trivial Pursuit, Monopoly, Scrabble, Ticket to Ride, Wingspan, Terraforming Mars. I'm not producing that sort of stuff, and there's only enough space in the market for a few of those games. Your goal should be to hit the sort of top 5% of games that are being released in a year. And do that consistently if you want to make a living out of it, or produce one really, really successful game that you can just live off that. But that's unlikely. There's probably, I don't know how many games become evergreen from each year. It's got to be less than 50, right? There's not many out of the thousands of games that are released each year. It's a very small percentage. And you can play the numbers game, you can do what Reiner Knizia does and churn out, you know, hundreds of games, which means that, you know, even if a very small percentage of your games, 5% of your games are hits, well, there we go. That's going to be enough probably for you to live off while the others fall by the wayside. But that's hard going. You've got to have a brilliant, genius mind and a really good system going to get that going. But I do know people who are doing this, and they're doing it full time, and increasingly so over the last 10 years. When I started working in board game design, there were very few, a handful of designers who were working full time, who weren't, you know, who were doing it freelance, who weren't employed by a publisher. Now, there's quite a lot out there, and actually the ones that are sharing their incomes online are doing very well, frankly. They're doing very well out of it. It's like any creative pursuit, you know, not every artist is going to make a fortune, not every fine artist, painter, not every actor is going to make a fortune. There's too many of them. There's too many board game designers for that to work. But some, if you can rise to the top, if you have a little bit of luck and some good judgment, I think it's possible to do it. So next question is probably related to this really, and it comes from a video which I made a while ago, which says, can you really do both? Juggling board game design with a full-time career. So let's have a quick look at that video and we'll come back to the question. If you've watched many of my videos and if you've spent a lot of time around game design circles, then you'll know that the vast majority of these games that we all love are not designed by full-time game designers. Most of these people have another job, and so do I. I've got a number of games on the market. In fact, today I had an offer to publish one of my games, and if it does come to market, which I hope it will, that will be my 12th published game. I'm a dentist, a full-time dentist and dental educator. I've got a family, I've got other hobbies and interests, I've got dogs, I've got all sorts of other things that have a demand on my time, and game design is actually a relatively small amount of time in my sort of working week. But it looms quite large in my head. I think about it a lot, okay? And I take the opportunities where I can to get designs made. And I've done it successfully, and you can do that too. So the question or statement is, one of my recent games had an extremely annoying design issue that made me halt the whole project, and then probably a year later I figured out a tiny rule change that would fix it instantly. In the end, I think it's a blessing to have a full-time job, at least if your game design path is still not 100% clear, and you don't have a big catalogue of games on the market to be financially stable. Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. You know, as I said in that video, that's what that whole video was about, the fact that really I'm quite happy to be a part-time board game designer and have a full-time job doing something which I really, really enjoy and brings in good, stable money all the time with none of these worries about tariffs and all the rest of it. It can be really helpful to have a job that you love alongside your board game design, which is your sort of your hobby career on the side. And that's how I approach it. And I agree with this viewer here. I've certainly had situations where I've put a game on the shelf and it's sat there for years, literally years, maybe even getting on for a decade. And I'm constantly, from time to time, I just come back to it and think, oh, there's that problem with that game. Will I ever fix that? And I don't know, maybe I will. But then I might play a game and it's got a new mechanism in it that I haven't come across before. And suddenly I go, that's it. That solves that issue that I've had with that game for years and years and years. Something about that distance and going away and doing other stuff just makes things a little bit easier. It also helps with things like, I've made a video, I don't know whether I'll have shared it by this point, a video about rejection, right? And there's a lot of that in the board game industry. If I haven't shared it yet, keep an eye out for it. I think it's a good video. And one of the key things to dealing with that rejection is going away and doing other stuff, right? Putting away the board games, turning off YouTube and Instagram, going out, having a walk, spending time with friends and family, doing your day job, and remembering if board game design is not your living, right, then well, the stakes are fairly low. Okay, you can get on with your life and not take everything too personally, right? Just try and have fun with it. And I think that is a nice way to do it. So next question comes from my video, challenged or overwhelmed? Getting the balance right. And the question is not actually related to the video, but it's related to my books. And it says, do you have a recommended order of reading your books for somebody just starting out? So my books are all books about board game design that are available on Amazon. You can buy them as physical copies, paperbacks, they're printed on demand, so they'll be sent out to you wherever you live in the world, or you can order them as ebooks. The first one, the Board Game Designer Journal, you can't get as an ebook because it's something you write in, but you can order it as a PDF of Drive-Thru RPG. So there's 4 books, the Board Game Designer Journal, Adam in Wales Playtesting, Adam in Wales Product Design, and Adam in Wales Getting Published. So what order should you read them? I would say the Adam in Wales Board Game Designer Journal is probably your starting point. That book is about developing you as a designer. It's got lots of prompts and guided reflections to get you thinking about how does design work? What matters to me? What are my goals? How am I approaching it? And constantly reflecting and giving yourself feedback. It's also got tools in there about, you know, how can you assess your games and decide what is a viable game, a viable commercial product, and so on. Which leads me into the product design book, which maybe I would leave a little bit later. I think probably you're going to go from the Board Game Designer Journal to maybe thinking about the Getting Published book. Adam in Wales Getting Published is a step-by-step guide from having your idea, playtesting it, prototyping it, and getting it in front of publishers, pitching it, signing contracts, and so on. And then maybe from there you can focus in on the playtesting aspect and read Adam in Wales Playtesting, which has 100 questions that you ask during playtesting and a rationale for each of them. The product design book is much more about creating commercial products, and it's probably more for people who are already sort of designing regularly, have already got games on the market and really want to hone that aspect of it, really want to make money. They don't just want to make niche products, okay? They want to make stuff that actually sells and people buy in large quantities. That's the focus of the product design book. I think all of them work really nicely together, right? There's not too much repetition in there. You know, hopefully I've kept them at a fairly affordable price. So I think it's a good idea to read all of them, but that's probably the order I'd go in. The journal, then Getting Published, then playtesting, and then product design. Final question for today then came from the video, how niche can a board game be while still being marketable? Let's have a quick look at that video. If you made a game around natural disasters and natural rock formations or plate tectonics, then I think those concepts are broad enough and understood well enough by a large number of the general population that you could probably make a really good, interesting game that people would buy into. But if you go into the real detail of a science, something which people just aren't going to understand, something that maybe you and your colleagues really enjoy, you might find you've got a very limited market from there. So I would say you can go into a niche, but you might want to stay very broad within that niche. And the question was, have you ever been inspired to make a dentistry-themed game? That could be fun and educational. Firstly, I'm a dentist, okay? I've mentioned earlier that I've got a full-time job outside of my game design. I'm a dentist. Have I ever thought about making a dentistry-themed game? I mean, I've thought about it. I've been asked about it quite a lot, fairly frequently. I've had publishers ask me, you know, have you thought about making a dentistry-themed game? Klaus Teuber, who made Settlers of Catan, he was a dental technician before he made his fortune with Catan. The guys behind Bitewing Games, who recently made Zoo Vardis, and they make loads of Reiner Knizia games, an Australian company. They're dentists. The name Bitewing is a type of dental x-ray that we take. So there are dentists in the industry. None of them have made a dentistry-themed game yet, as far as I'm aware. Why is that? Nobody wants to be a dentist, right? It's not fun being a dentist. I said I love my job, but it's not because it's fun, right? No kid runs around pretending to be a dentist. I could conceive of an educational dentist game, right? We could make an educational game about oral health, oral hygiene, and you know, promoting good hygiene practices and so on, and trying to help people to save their teeth and telling them what things to eat and giving them dietary advice and smoking cessation advice and all those sorts of things. How boring would that be? Okay. Or we could make a game like Crocodile Dentist, where you're extracting teeth from a plastic crocodile and hoping that its jaws don't snap shut. That seems like the logical type of dentist game to make, but it's not really dentistry, is it? Now, I did actually recently buy this one, Battle Dental. You can see I haven't actually opened yet, it's still in shrink, so I don't actually know how it plays. But this is a game where you've got a goblin and a troll, I think, and they're trying to extract teeth from a jawbone. It looks lovely. It looks really sort of gruesome, but one of them wants rotten teeth and one of them wants nice clean white teeth. Yeah, I have no idea whether it's any good or not, but I couldn't resist it because this is a true dentistry-themed game. But you'll note, I mean, it says here a Core Quest game, so presumably it's by the same company who made that sort of, you know, children's dungeon crawl game, Core Quest. So it's got this sort of fantastical setting. I think that's probably more important than the dental aspect of it. We see medical games, don't we? Things like Dice Hospital and video games around simulating hospitals. But it's a bit more relatable, isn't it? Simulating a dental practice. I mean, what would that be? Arranging appointments and running late and, you know, patients getting nervous and anxious and trying to calm them down. It's not really a fascinating topic. The most fascinating thing about dentistry is the manual dexterity bit of it. So I guess if you could replicate that in some way, you know, make a game that is about putting in fillings and taking out teeth and applying braces or you know, doing root canal treatment or whatever it is. There's a nice, you could imagine a dexterity game sort of based around that. I'm talking myself into it now, but frankly, who would buy it? So no, I play games to forget about dentistry, okay? To take my mind off it, as much as I love it, to take my mind off it and do something else, right? Game design is my stress release valve in quite a stressful career. So yeah, anyway, that brings me to a close for today. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to go back and watch some of my others where I go through YouTube comments. I'll probably try and do another one like this in a few weeks or the next couple of months. And if you enjoyed this video, you might also enjoy my books. I mentioned them earlier. Go and have a look on Amazon, look up Adam in Wales Board Game Design, and you'll find my 4 books. If you do buy one of them, if you do enjoy it, please leave me an Amazon review. It really, really helps. The algorithm is everything on Amazon. It shows the books to other people if they've got reviews. If they haven't got reviews, no one's seeing it. And I mean, aside from any income for me, right, I'm not able to help other designers if nobody knows that these books exist. So anyway, thanks for joining, thanks for watching. Please subscribe, comment, ask questions, and I'll try and revisit them in a future video. All the best.